5 movies in, and to be quite honest, in my opinion, there's no bad Evil Dead film. None of them. Hey guys, it's All Is Dread here to talk about Evil Dead Rise, which is directed by Lee Cronin and is distributed by Warner Brothers. So the film's main plot point involves two sisters whose reunion gets interrupted by an earthquake unearthing the Book of the Dead, a surge of ultraviolence giving rise to the demonic entities known as Deadites. Alright guys, first and foremost, what I really enjoyed about this movie would definitely be the opening titles. I thought that was really creative. That was so effective at getting us pumped for what's to come. Also, the setting, the fact that it's taking place in an apartment building, a high rise, is just great. This deviation from the cabin in the woods setting, I really enjoyed, and the fact that they utilize this confined space. Ellie specifically was my favorite. Alyssa Sutherland did a tremendous job going from protagonist to antagonist and that gradual shift into becoming the Deadite.
Mom? Mommy's with the maggots now.
I thought was just really eerie and creepy, unsettling. This movie, all types of bodily harm, I will say that. Anything you can think of, people getting scalped, people getting stabbed, bludgeoned, impaled, it's just, it goes on. It does not let you go for the ride. And that's what I love. Like, from the moment that we're getting all this dialogue between the family members and their shortcomings, which makes them more relatable, I would say. I think it also makes it visceral. It's like a very sad feeling when you're like in an empathetic sort of way, like putting yourself in the character's shoes and like imagining somebody that you love being taken by this grotesque monstrosity. I also wanted to give praise to the cinematography in this movie. One of my favorite things about this movie would have to be the peephole. Like that, the way that's shot and that perspective that we get is really interesting, especially with some of the kills that aren't really fully shown. I think that was really cool just to kind of like have that duality between all the extreme violence to, yeah, there's still violence, but some of the kills not being on screen, which I thought was really, like I said, interesting. It was a really interesting perspective and a cool shot seeing Ellie just like full-blown Deadite. Also, the gore and violence was just perfection in this movie. From what I read, according to the director, it had, or they used, over 1,700 gallons of blood, whereas in 2013's Evil Dead, they used, I believe, over 50,000 gallons of blood just for that raining blood scene alone. So I think they still hold the title for most blood used. But the fact that they use that much blood in this movie, and then that scene with the elevator, the blood gushing everywhere, which I think is clearly a Shining reference. I think that was one of my favorites. And also the film has quite a few callbacks that I was just so excited for. I was like a giddy child when I got the references. For example, there's a scene where all the Deadites are chanting Dead by Dawn, which is from Evil Dead 2. But also with Beth, when she says, "Come get some," which is a line from Army of Darkness. There's quite a few moments of that where I'm like, oh man, I love that they incorporated so much from the previous films. Another thing that I honed in on was the family dynamics. For example, Ash and Cheryl from the first Evil Dead. Also in 2013's Evil Dead, there's Mia and David. And in this one, obviously, Ellie and Beth. So I really enjoyed a lot of the elements that they included in this film that makes me think of the previous films and how it all kind of ties in, even though this movie is completely its own film. This is not like a continuation of 2013's. Even though the tones are similar, it still retained some dark humor in it. Like some of the obscenity, like the lines by these Deadites, it's Ellie, is just hilarious because it threw me off. It was unexpected. Another thing that I really wanted to point out was that unlike the previous films where the female characters are being held by the vines and being violated, when Ellie is getting possessed, she is being restrained by these elevator wires, but it doesn't go that far. I had a discussion with one of my friends and how he believed this movie was pretty tame compared to the others, but I really don't see like how it would be considered tamed. I still think it was like full throttle, in your face, just gore, violence, just insanity all throughout. So that's just my personal opinion, but I'd really like to know your guys' opinion. If you've watched the movie, do you guys think this was a pretty tamed Evil Dead movie? I just don't agree with that, but you know, to each their own. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention that I really loved about this movie was the soundscapes. So whoever was in charge of the audio engineering, which I kind of want to look up right now and just kind of, it's piquing my interest because I'm like curious who was in charge of that. All right, so Peter Albertson signed on as sound designer for Evil Dead Rise. There's a scene where Danny, who is playing the record on the turntable, and you hear the incantation, and it just gave me shivers. Just how it's amplified, it just really gave me goosebumps in a good way. Now, there's one thing that I did want to mention that I nitpicked a little bit, and I had to sit on that, but it didn't take away from the experience or the overall enjoyment of the film, but that would be the big climax, this boss battle that I'm not going to get into because I don't want to spoil the movie for anyone. But that to me was a bit dull. And without giving any spoilers away, I think it's just because there was more of a hindrance towards what the Deadites were trying to accomplish when they did what they did. And if you know what I mean, where it didn't really enhance the terror for me. It just felt really funny. Like I said, a boss battle, very redolent of Resident Evil. And if you know, you know. But that was the only thing I felt really mixed on. I will give it credit that the suspense was there, and there were definitely a lot of moments of tension. Like the suspense with that third act really got me, but the Deadites itself, it was like, man, I really wish they would have just done something a little bit different. But I will say, anyone who does love horror movies that contain extreme violence and gore, this is definitely the type of movie you should check out. This is definitely for fans of Evil Dead, and hopefully it attracts more people. I mean, the marketing for this movie was genius which I think is also a detriment in my opinion, because I saw so many reels and videos on Instagram and also the Red Band trailer, and I think the trailer gave quite a bit away where nothing was really unexpected other than the lines, like the dialogue, and probably the third act. That was pretty much it, but everything else, like, you pretty much see in the trailer. So it's really predictable in that aspect. Like, you know what's going to happen to an extent. I don't have much else to say about Evil Dead Rise other than horror fans who love extreme violence and gore, you'll get your money's worth. You'll really enjoy this movie. And also, one thing that I didn't mention earlier on is the wraparound story that we get in conjunction with the main plot of the movie. Like I said, overall, really enjoyed it. Really satisfied. I'm not going to keep talking about it anymore because I could keep rambling on. I do want to do a ranking of all the films at some point. Bruce Campbell actually does appear in the film as a voice who's opposing one of the priests in connection to the controversial findings of the Book of the Dead. Needless to say, guys, I hope you have an awesome night. I hope I've convinced you to go out and see Evil Dead Rise. But yeah, stay groovy.